Hi everyone, happy December. So it is December 1st and we're going to be doing our first craft using Christmas fabric. So for this craft, you will need a jelly roll. To make one stocking, you'll need a half a yard of fabric, and you'll either need the June Tailor Christmas Stocking Quilt As You Go kit, or you'll need some scraps of batting and a template I'm gonna provide for free. So this is something that you can print out. It's in the description of this video. You will have a link to my blog and the PDF will be there to download for free. So this stocking is the one made using the June Tailor kit. And then I did a little DIY and did one myself without a kit. So they both turn out very, very cute. I think you'll be happy making either one. The shape is just a little bit different on mine. The toe of the stocking doesn't curve down as much, but otherwise they are super cute, really easy to put together. For one stocking, I think I used 6 or 7 jelly roll strips. So it's a great way to use up just some extra strips you may have from a jelly roll that you used most of them for some other project, or just make a bunch of them as gifts if you want to. So let's jump into the project. Okay, so for day one of our Christmas fabric projects, we're going to be making a quilt as you go Christmas stocking. So I absolutely love the quilt as you go method, and I really think it's convenient having kits like this. I've done a ton of the June Tailor tote bags and other projects, and I find it really, really nice to just be able to pick up a package like this and have already printed batting. However, obviously that can cost a little more money. So I did, as an alternative, make some template patterns. And if you have some scrap batting on hand, you can also just use this. I'm gonna show this, how to put the template together and everything like that after I finish the pre-printed quilt as you go batting. Okay, so for this project, you'll either need the template and some batting scraps or the kit. And then I really like to use the 505 adhesive on projects like this. And I prefer just grabbing a jelly roll of fabric that I really prefer using. You can also, if you have some yardage you really like, just cut down 2.5-inch strips if you prefer. And then you'll need some yardage for the backing. If you are using the kit, it'll tell you all of your fabric requirements within that. Later on, I'll tell you how much backing fabric and how many strips you'll need for the other version of the project. So let's open this up and see what we have. Okay, so once we open the kit, we'll see how our stocking looks, and then the other side of the stocking is down here. So we'll also need a ribbon for the loop. I'll probably just sew up a loop from one of my extra pieces of fabric. I'll show you how I do that, and if I decide to use ribbon, which I have a ton on hand, it'll just go with the pattern. So on the front of the kit, you'll see the fabric requirements. 1/8 of a yard of 4 to 8 fabrics, or 8 2.5 pre-cut strips. So your jelly roll strips, 8 of those. And then you'll need some binding fabric, which I'll just use a color from the jelly roll because it's a 2.5 by 18-inch strip of fabric. And then a 1/2 yard for the backing fabric and 6 inches of ribbon for hanging. So I think the requirements that you'll need will be about the same if you're going to use my template. I'll let you know if it's a little bit less or a little bit more when we get to that step. So I'm going to open up my jelly roll and I'm going to pick out at least 8 strips for piecing the stocking portion. And if I'm going to pick out the binding strip as well. And then I'm going to set aside a piece for using to hang it unless I decide to go with ribbon. So, oh, my poor little snowmen, most of them have their heads cut off on here. That happens a lot with strips. So I really love the polka dot. So this is what I do. I just go through and pick out ones that stand out to me. I want some that are super Christmassy. And use that for the binding. So I'm going to set all the rest of this fabric aside because I can use that for another project. And then that was supposed to go with those. I will, you know, you'll see how it can lay out, and make sure that I have a nice variety. Of strips, and I think I'll be okay. I think I'll have a nice mix of colors and everything. So part of the nice thing about getting a kit like this is on the inside, it'll tell me exactly how long to cut my strips to cover the batting. So what I'm gonna do now is figure out how I want to lay them out on each stocking, and I'm going to cut them per the pattern to make sure I already have them the right size. So they're going to be numbered 1 through 16. So if I know one of my little pieces, I want it to go on 16, what I'll do is cut a little piece of paper and pin it to it so I know where it goes on the stocking. So I'm gonna starch all these and cut them down, all my strips, to the size that I need. And then I'm also going to use my spray starch to attach my backing fabric to both sides, or to, not to both sides, I meant to each side of the back of each stocking. So I am going to trim around here about a ½ inch to 1 inch away. Okay, so now I have both of those. And what I'm gonna do is lay my fabric down. I'm gonna press it first, but just to show you, because I'm gonna get it all done at once. So I would already have this starched and pressed, and I'm gonna lay it down in a safer area, you know, where I'm not gonna get all the fumes from my spray starch all over me. So I have my fabric face down, and then I'm going to lay my stocking on it. And what I like to do is just lift it a little bit and spray, or I'll lay out some parchment paper, and sometimes I'll lay out parchment paper, spray the back of my batting really good, and then flip it on to my fabric and press it down. So I would have the spray start, or the 505 on the back, press it down onto the fabric. The nice thing about doing it that way is that you're not going to get the spray adhesive all over all the rest of your fabric so you can use it later for something. Okay, so I'm going to get this fabric pressed. My strips all starched and pressed, and then I'm going to cut them per the requirements on my instructions and label them so I know where they'll go on the stocking. Okay, so here's what I have so far, and I want to show you that of the 8 fabrics I picked out, I didn't use 2 of them at all. And then I have quite a bit of little scraps left over. So if you see, I have all of my fabrics laid out the way I like, so that I like how it looks on everything. I'm not going to leave it this way when I go to sew, but I have everything numbered so I know where each one will go, and I just pinned a little piece of paper with the number on the strip. So I'm going to take them off. So 16 would be the bottom one, then I'll put 15 on top, because these get sewn on in order. 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. So 9 will be the first one that gets sewn onto this stocking. And just so you can see, it goes over the edge quite a bit. Now, when I take this, and you see that I have my backing, I spray adhesived it on. So 9 will be the first one that gets sewn on to this stocking. And 10 is going to lay right sides together, and you'll want to make sure it all hangs past the marked line. And then what I do is I put a pin or two in so that it lays all nice and lined up. And then when I take this to the sewing machine, I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam along here and press it open. And then I'll do the same thing with 11 on this side. I'll lay it right sides together, sew a 1/4 inch along that seam and press it open. Then I'll be able to keep working 12, 13, press it open. So I have this one prepped and ready to go. So I'll take this right over to the sewing machine and I just sew there. And the reason the spray starch was so important is because if you spray starch it nice and heavy, you can just press open the seam and keep working. If you need to go to the iron and iron out so you get nice crisp seams, you could do that as well. So again, with this one, I have 8, 7, and then 1 we'll leave there. So let me turn that. So I got a little, lay number 2 down. And again, you'll want to make sure you go over each side. And look, if I press this open, it won't quite cover up there. So I'm going to need to go up a little more on this one. So when it presses over, it goes, it makes sure that it covers up that top seam there. So I'll do that sometimes just to make sure that it'll cover up enough when you press it open. Okay, so I have that one ready, and then after I'll do 3 in the same way. All right, so like I said, I have my strip here that I'm going to use for the binding, but I'm also thinking about if I have 6 inches of leftover fabric, I could also use that for making that ribbon strap. So what I do for that is just press into the centers like I'm making a strap, fold over, and I'll just do 1/8 of an inch seam along each side to make this into my little ribbon piece for this project. You guys, I do this far too often, but I skipped a step because I was too excited. So it'll make it so much easier for you if at this point you sew just inside of this marked line. So I'll show that, but that is so when you are finished sewing all your strips on, you can flip it and cut out, kind of use it as a template to cut out your stocking. As you see here, I have all the quilting, but I didn't do that step, so I can't see easily where to cut. So what I'm gonna have to do, and you see I sewed on an extra one because sometimes I'll have, I'll fall a little bit short, so I'll just sew a little extra piece on at the end. It's probably because I don't cut very accurate 1/4 inch seams sometimes, and that is what it is. So see, it's going to be so much harder for me to cut this out now, but I can kind of lift up and see where to go, but I'm just going to have to go very slow with it, obviously, right? So I'll cut out along here. Let me just show you. I'll have to cut off the backing first. So let me cut this off and show you what I'm gonna do. I can always find a way to fix stuff when I do something silly, but it's obviously better if you follow directions. So I have that cut off, and then what I can do is come through here and use that as a guide to cut. Now what I can also do is just finish this one and then trace around it on here, so I have that as a guide to cut as well. the best thing is just to do it right the first time. So I'm gonna go sew around this and show you what it looks like and how you can use that as a guide for cutting. Okay, so I sewed all the way around, and as you can see, now I have this guide that I can cut along to more easily cut out my stocking. So now at this point, I'm going to start, I'll put 9 back down, lay 10, and go ahead and finish off this one. And then I'll show you the rest of the assembly. Okay, so now that we have this done with the template to trace around, I want to show you something that can become a little difficult when you're cutting it out, is that these end pieces can flip up on you. So one of my little things I like to do is put some spray starch there. That just helps it stay in place. You could also tack it down with some thread. I'm going to do this really carefully because I'm not using a lot, so hopefully it won't. But you just want something to tack it down because it is kind of hard to cut around it with it flapping around. Okay, so now I'm just going to cut along those threads that I stitched around the batting. Now I'm not cutting through them, but if I do, it's not that big of a deal because they're really just there to be as a guide, as a template. All right, so now I'm going to use this one as a guide to cut this other one out. I have this little corner here that should help me. I'm going to take a little peek and make sure I'm in the right spot there. I have these big sew tights that should help me hold this while I cut, if I can get them off. They're really hard to get apart, but they're really good at holding thick fabrics together. Let's give it a whirl, I guess. So you see how I'm doing this reversed because I need this side to be my outside. Okay, so we need to sew these right sides together, and we're going to sew leaving the top opening over because that's where we're going to put our binding and the little strap that we made for hanging. Okay, so I'm going to clip these in place with Wonder Clips. Okay, so I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and sew around. Okay, so you can see I sewed around the entire stocking, and what I'm going to do is clip some of my edges so there's not going to be so much bulk there. And I sewed around here using about 1/2 inch. I wasn't completely 100% accurate the whole time because it's going to be just a stocking that hangs. If it was something that I needed to, you know, stay more accurate with, I would have tried to. I'm going to clip along some of these curves just so they will hopefully lay a little bit nicer. Just put a little slits, and I'm making sure not to cut through my stitches at the top. So here, if you wanted to, if you have a serger, you could serge along the edges. You could pink them. You could just do a zigzag stitch across them. I'm just going to leave them as is, because if I do anything with this in a decorative way around the house, it's just going to be as a decoration, and I'm not going to be using it as a stocking that I would be putting anything in for my kids or my husband or anything. So I'm not too worried about the inside seams getting frayed on here. So I'm just gonna push it out, right side out, make sure everything looks good. It is a really cute stocking. I love these colors. It's so cheerful. Okay, so now I need to, let's see what side looks nicer. So don't forget, you're gonna wanna pin this somewhere where you like it for hanging. So I think I'm gonna put it right at the seam at the end here. So what you can do at this point is put a few stitches in or leave a pin. I'm probably gonna put a few stitches in just so I don't have to worry about it. So give me 1 minute. Okay, so I have the little loop stitched in place. It's probably a bit bigger than I needed it to be, but that's fine. So I'm actually gonna do this a little bit different than the pattern instructions say, because for me, it makes more sense. And I'm gonna cut off the, okay, so we're gonna put raw sides together, and I'm not gonna start at a seam, because when I finish off this binding, I don't want to have all of that bolt coming together at one spot. So I'm going to start, say, like around here, and I have a little bit hanging off just to be able to bring my binding together later. So I'm just going to sew across here 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to come to the seam here, and then I will join my bindings together, flip it to the right side, turn this all right side out, flip it to the right side, and then top stitch it in place. Okay, so the stocking from the kit is finished, and isn't it just darling? It is so cute. So I did have a little bit of bunching from where I put my binding together, because I did it by, I cut it by eye instead of actually measuring, and so I decided this will be the front. That's how I solved that. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the template that you can print for free off of my blog. So that you can make one without the kit. So here's how the pieces will come together for the stocking shape, and all you'll need to do is pretty much cut it out and tape it. So what I would say would work best is cutting your right sides along that lighter line. It's kind of shows where the pattern pieces come together. And then leave that line on the left side. So then you can kind of line up and make sure the lines are meeting and put some tape there. Now, if you want to make a lot of these, I would suggest attaching them to some like parchment paper, or is it wax paper? The paper that has that waxy feel to it. If you attach it to that, then you'll make a firmer pattern piece that'll work a little bit better for you if you're gonna make them over and over. So again, we're gonna cut along here. So I freehand drew this stocking in my EQ quilting program as a applique piece, and then I just made it really big to print out. So it may have a few like little weird ticks in it because it was really hard to draw it on there, but I didn't want to steal anybody else's work because I just don't think that's right. So I think it'll be super cute once it's finished, and you'll be able to just use your batting scraps instead of getting a kit. So we're just gonna trace this on, I'm making a mess on my little work table, onto some batting. If you wanted to, before you did that, you could reinforce this a bit. Like I said, if you were gonna use it over and over, freezer paper, that's what it is. The kind of waxy side of freezer paper, you could iron it on to this and cut it out so that it's a little more sturdy. Oh, good grief. Now the trick here that you have to remember when you trace this onto your batting, well, one, I highly suggest that you use a cotton batting. Otherwise, it can be kind of weird to use for tracing and for doing this purpose as quilt as you go. You're also going to need a marker that will show up. You'll need something that marks and shows up on the batting. I have always just used a permanent marker. Now I will tell you, you'll want to give it a little bit of time to dry onto your batting, or just be okay that it will probably get onto your hands as you work. So just a warning on that. If you have another idea of what you could use to mark on this, then go ahead and use that. But I have found that the permanent marker works the best. So we're just gonna trace around and kind of make our own line to follow. Now next, you'll want to remember to reverse it the other way and trace around. Okay, so now at this point, you could just think about how you want to approach attaching your strips, because here you have a little more leeway, right? You don't have already marked lines that you have to follow. So I think what I'm going to do this time around is just do them straight across. Just make it super simple, and that's it. You could still do them on the diagonal, and I would just go along, where's my big ruler, and measure and see how far your strip is going to be. Something you could also do is, if you're using 2.5 inch strip with your seam allowance, your lines are going to want to be 2 inches wide. So you could go ahead and draw those and mark those off and measure them, and then you would know how long of strips you needed. So there's a lot of ways you could go with this, with doing the pattern yourself. You're kind of more open to your own creativity. So I'm going to rough cut these out. Again, and I'm going to get my backing ready, basted in place. I kind of drew these a little closer together than I probably should have in some spots. So I'm going to attach these to my backing and then just decide how I want to do my quilt as you go on. And I'm pretty sure I'm just going to go in straight lines this time and see how it looks. Okay, so here are my stockings ready to go. I have some strips laid out. So just for yardage information for you, it was about 1/2 yard again to use as a backing. And then for strips, 2.5 inch strips, I used 5 different strips. You will probably need 6 total to get a little, your little loop if you want, and to do the binding at the top. So those are the fabric requirements. So I decided to just attach these straight on. So what I'm going to do is just stack them up instead of labeling them, since I'm just going to go in order starting from the top. So those are going to go there, and then same here. And I overlap them a little because remember, we're going to have a seam allowance, so they're not going to go on, you know, they need to be overlapped to compensate for that seam allowance. So here's everything prepped. This time on both of them, I remember to sew around so that I can cut them off later. So I'm just going to go to the sewing machine with each one, lay my strip straight across, lining up with my line, maybe go a little bit over just for stretching. Lay the next one next to it because I want to make sure that I'm covering up, going all the way across my lines. Lay them together and sew a 1/4 inch seam, press it out, and then just keep doing that with the next one in my pile. So this is going to be really easy to do this way. I hope it turns out just as cute as the other one. I'll do the same with this one. Now, I didn't mention it before, but once you get all these sewn on, if you would like, you could do a little bit more decorative quilting or anything like that that you would like before cutting out. So I'm going to get all these sewn on, then cut out following my stitches on the back. Bring them together just like before, bind it and all of that. And so I'll show you this one all finished. Okay, so here is the finished stocking using the template I made on my EQ quilt designer. So I think it turned out really cute as well. So here are them side by side so you can kind of see how they look compared. This one just curves down a little bit more, and otherwise they're actually pretty similar. So I think you'd be happy making either one. It's a great way to use up if you have a few extra Christmas jelly roll strips from a different project. It's a fun way to use those up, I think. So again, you can grab the template I made in the description of this video. There will be a link to my blog where you can download this as a PDF and put together your Christmas stocking. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to check out the rest of the Christmas crafts I'm going to be making using Christmas fabric this month. Bye.